Hello, and welcome to Take the Stand Inclusive Leaders. I'm Denis-Smith, and I'm the founder and CEO of Obelisk Support, a legal services business, and the founder of the First 100 Years and Next 100 Years projects, which celebrate the achievements of women in law and diversity. I'm on a mission to make the legal sector a more inclusive place, and so I've invited legal industry leaders who also care about inclusivity to have a conversation with me. This week, I'm talking to Richard Given, Group General Counsel with OpenPayd, a fintech company operating in the global payment sector. Welcome to Take the Stand, Richard.
Thank you for having me. Lovely to see you.
It's a pleasure to discuss this very important topic with you. So I want us to start on a quite broad question and to ask you, what does inclusive leadership mean to you?
So thank you. Inclusive leadership has many aspects to it, I'd suggest. It is about making sure that all peoples feel able to provide their viewpoints and in supporting and creating a supportive environment so that all types of people can thrive and reach their potential.
That's a very good explanation of the concepts. They're not easy to boil down, but I'm going to try to push you that a little bit further and say, what do you think could be 2 or 3 qualities really of an inclusive leader if we had to kind of make them quite small and very distinct? What would you say they need to be?
2 or 3 thoughts. I think you need to inspire people, you need to trust people, and you need to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is not being weak, it is actually a strength. It's showing people that they can bring their concerns and they can ask you questions, and that's the way people learn. For me, leadership is about creating an environment, creating a space for people to be able to do their best work, giving them the trust to deliver, and then giving them the guidance to help them perform.
So my next question is about your leadership style, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to share an example of what is your leadership style in practice. I know a little bit like me, you started in one of the big Magic Circle law firms and you went through the corporate world. And I wonder how your leadership style evolved through that journey, and give us an example of your style in practice.
I had the great opportunity, particularly in my first couple of jobs, to work with cultures all over the world and people from all over the world. And I realized very quickly that you can't just apply one model to every situation. So I think one of the key for me is listening and understanding what makes your team members, your colleagues, your counterparties, even tick. What is it that they are looking for and how to engage them? Whether it's a colleague of mine from the Far East whose attitude was to always listen very carefully and considerately for quite a period of time before they were prepared to offer their opinion. And if you're too quick in your running of a meeting, they would never say anything because they weren't ready to, and then you'd move on to the next topic. And so for them, it was very important that you allowed the conversation to carry on, and then you would ask them specifically, have you got any thoughts? And it was amazing how often in those conversations, when you took the time to let them reflect internally and then present, you got some really valuable input, which you could easily have missed without realizing, because Brits would go, right, let's have the conversation. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, done. Okay, anyone comments? Right, move on. And that sort of transactional speed that is very British way of performing lost other people in that conversation. I think that's well. The second thing is to acknowledge that I'm human and I make mistakes, and I make mistakes all the time, and not to try and pretend that I don't. I think that, and inviting my team, therefore, to call me when they think that I've made a mistake. And I had one of those recently with one of my team. I took the wrong approach in something, and they called me on it, and I stopped and went, "You're right. That's absolutely right. We're doing this wrong." And I think that's important as well. No one's perfect. It's how you deal with the imperfections that makes a difference.
It's such a great answer. I'm going to ask you a little bit about when you look back into your career, because obviously you're aware of how important your style is to other people. But I wonder whether you can share an experience of an inclusive leader or a situation that was an inclusive leadership situation that influenced your career journey, and why did it matter so much to you at the time or maybe even today?
So, an example I'll give, actually is a bad example in the sense of it's what shouldn't be done. And it was a sales colleague who was so fixated on delivering what they wanted that they were prepared to put their face in my face and threaten me. And a realization at that point that I had to stand for something, and I had to be, as a lawyer, recognize my responsibilities as a lawyer, and to be independent and so forth. That struck me that I can't just go along with how other people expect of me. I have to own my own space, be proud of who I am, and deliver what I believe to be the right answer as a lawyer. So while it's not necessarily what you were looking for, it was for me it was probably one of those impactful moments in my career of standing there and going, this is wrong, and actually I need to do something different. So for me, that's probably the most impactful example I can give.
Yeah, somebody that literally is crowding your space by the sound of it.
Mm.
So, maybe almost too inclusive in the wrong way. It's a
Yeah.
great example, really. And actually, because I said I'm on a mission to kind of make the legal profession, more open and more inclusive, why do you think, and what do you think, are still the main barriers that we're facing to achieve that, and why?
Managing Partners Conference that I was on the panel of an event at 10 years ago now. And the facilitator asked each of us on the group what was our one bit of advice be to managing partners about what they do to change and go forward in the profession. And at the end, I was the last one to speak, and we'd had all the usual sort of technology process kind of answers. And I actually looked at them and I said, if I were you, my answer would be don't change anything. The model's broken, but you're making a ton of money and you'll be retired long before this becomes a problem. So why would you change? And the indignation in the room was, well, it was ironic that they were all indignant that how could I possibly think this? And yet that's pretty much exactly what's happened. They've all retired and not a lot has changed. I think fundamentally the problem is that the quarterly focus on billings and withdrawings of the traditional law firm model inhibits the idea of making long-term decisions and I know that's a huge generalization and there's lots of exceptions to that, but there's a mindset attitude to the way law firms are built that it is how do we make more billings, how do we make more money this quarter, and not necessarily for the long term. And it's required organizations outside the traditional law firm model to try and change the model, and that progress has been lumpy at best. I was saddened to see that EY have just shut down Riverview Law that they purchased from Carl Chapman. I was very hopeful that the models like Riverview Law would help drive some of this and create the opportunities for it. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that the historic model of the legal profession, the partnership model, doesn't lend itself to people's current views of how they want to live their lives. And that tension is still being worked out. You see a huge amount of people drop out of the legal profession because they don't conceive of a career path that attracts them. And that's a tragedy. Really good talent is leaving because they can't see a way to stay. And we need to face into that.
What could we be doing to improve inclusive leadership?
I think general counsels have a responsibility to engage their law firms in a conversation around how to make careers more attractive. I had a conversation with a partner at a firm who was hesitant to introduce me to one of their colleagues because they only work 3 days a week, and that wouldn't necessarily work for us because they wouldn't be around 5 days a week. And I had to say, actually, surely the answer is you and I should have a conversation about how we can change our model. If they're the right lawyer because of their skill set, then we should find a way to work within their constraints. It may not happen, but you shouldn't give up just because of that model. So I think that GCs have a responsibility. Now, we're as guilty as anybody of talking out of both sides of our mouths, in the sense of I can say all this and then come Friday afternoon and I haven't quite got round to getting some work done properly, and I end up farming it out to the law firm and I need it done by Monday, and I've just ruined someone's weekend. So we all have a responsibility to buy into this. And it comes from the GCs, it comes from the senior partners, it comes from the managing partners, it comes from all aspects of the legal profession, frankly.
Now, I want to go back to introspection because obviously leadership is involving quite a lot of work on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, in your view, what do you think is the one question a leader should ask himself or herself if they want to be more inclusive?
What is it in how I operate that is inhibiting people from flourishing, I guess, or putting it in a more positive way? What can I do to make it even better? And that question probably ought to be one they then ask all their team to answer, and have their team answer it through in a way in which they feel confident to say it without fear of retribution, because sometimes they'll give you answers you don't want, you don't like, but you need to hear. I think that is probably the one question. I mean, there's 101 further questions, but I think starting there.
Great advice. So I'm going to ask you my last question. Obviously, everybody gets asked all of the same questions that you've been asked. So my last question is a positive role model of inclusive leadership for you. Who is it and why?
Someone who inspires me, and he's actually a leadership consultant. Am I allowed one of them? And that's Kieran Fenton, and his work he's done with lawyers of all seniorities and shapes and sizes, and his belief that we can be better, and his desire to help us each be better, and his recognition that being better can just be in small pieces. For me, since I first met him many years ago, that has inspired me probably more than anybody else. So while there isn't necessarily a team that I point to him leading, his leadership advice and has been probably the most impactful for me.
I think it's a great answer because actually he had, he was a pioneer in looking into this whole leadership problem, if you like, that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's a good example, and he's, he knows his stuff as well. So I think it's great. And he's had quite a personal journey as well in terms of, how he enriched himself in understanding that better. So I think it's, a good answer.
Okay.
So thank you, Richard, for being on our program and for taking part. This concludes our interview.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you found this conversation interesting and useful, and it's given you plenty of ideas for making your workplace, your team, and organization more inclusive. To find more conversations on inclusivity, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Obelisk Support, or connect with me on LinkedIn, searching Dana Denis-Smith and heading to my videos section. If you have any questions or feedback, you can also write to me by email. You can get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. My email is d.denis-smith@obelisksupport.com. Thank you for watching Take the Stand, Inclusive Leaders, and see you next time. Thank you.